Good morning. Today we're going to talk about something a little bit difficult, specifically about porn. And I want to just kind of open up with an idea, and then at the end I'll kind of show you specifically what I'm talking about. So, one thing that we oftentimes forget is when there is a very glaring problem in a person's character, there's the grand majority of the time, there's possibly every time, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe every time, I don't know. What I look like, a doctor? Just kidding. The grand majority of the time, there is an underlying problem, and I'll kind of explain what I'm talking about. So, if, for instance, if you show me a control freak, I'll show you someone who is trying to be perfect and earn love. They're trying to make themselves valuable by being perfect. They're trying to, maybe oftentimes earn a father's appreciation who never valued them. Trying to do something that they feel matters, stuff like that. Someone who is a pain to deal with because of something that happened to them. Show me someone who has a lot of anger problems, and typically, I almost guarantee there is a problem somewhere in their past with an unresolved emotional sadness. I'll give you an example. There was a kid who just had blackout rages, and you might think, oh well, he just needed a good spanking. He just, his parents need to get on it. Here's the thing: he walked in on his parent. I don't want to give out too many details, but he walked in on his parent uh, after they had committed suicide. So I mean, then the other parent left them. So I mean, it's really easy to say, oh, that kid's a brat. That kid's a show me somebody with a severe anger problem, and I will almost always guarantee you that there's some kind of unresolved emotional sadness. There was somebody who I was talking to the other day, and they had very much so an anger problem, and their parents got a divorce when they were a kid. And the dad said something before he left and never came back. You can't endure that kind of sadness and, then be perfectly fine. And you also can't expect someone to be perfect so that they don't annoy you when they're dealing with something that you have no idea what they're talking about. There was a book called "In Every Pew Is a Broken Heart," and it was by one of the Grahams. I think it was Ruth Graham Lotz. I think was her name. But anyways, and the idea is that there's a lot of hurting people. There's a lot of stories you don't understand. So maybe before you get too judgmental and jerky, remember that people have their own problems. We want everybody to bend around us, but then we don't want to bend around other people. Show me a person that's attacked. I'm sorry. Show me someone who is overly attached to success, everything about them is just focused on success. They're hell-bent on it. And I'll show you someone who is not validated at an early stage of their development. It's like almost guaranteed. It's scary how much who we are as an adult is formed from our childhood. We think when we become a kid, we just like, ta-da, here I am, I've arrived. That's not how it is at all. We're in an older body, and our reasoning and our brain is slightly more advanced and stuff, but we're still the same person. And show me a person, and this is kind of where I want to lead this to, show me someone with an addiction to porn or something else, and there is usually an unmet emotional problem. A lot of the people who I talk to who have a porn addiction, there was abandonment, maybe divorce of parents, that kind of stuff, and there was loneliness, maybe parents who weren't overly involved in them. And these things are tragic, and I feel like they're being oftentimes ignored. And so not just with how we treat people, but how we deal with ourselves. Like, okay, there's this thing that I need to work through, but I'm going to focus on the symptoms of the problem instead of the problem. So it is our coping mechanism. It's like smoking. A lot of times I see people smoking to relieve stress, but it just makes them more stressed and agitated. So what are they so stressed out about? Well, usually it's something that they need somebody for. But instead, they're just kind of, smokers. excuse me. And there's a lot more that I could say there, but I think I'll just move on. I'm definitely not trying to oversimplify the problem. I'm not saying, here's the boxes and just real simple. And people aren't simple. The issue isn't simple. But there's lots of reasons for things. And the point that I'm trying to make is that there's a cause for things happening. There is a cause for things happening. The danger is that we learn coping mechanisms instead of dealing with the problem. And it negatively affects us in our development. If you're trying to focus on getting over anxiety and depression, addiction, those kinds of things, you might be working with symptoms instead of with the real problem. Not always, but it's worth thinking about. Be willing, if you're trying to work through those things, be willing to forgive. Be willing to work through issues. If you're not willing to forgive, it's going to rot away your heart, and you won't be able to deal with these other things. You can't have an inner turmoil in your heart and then be able to conquer your anxiety. It's not going to happen. Oh, well, you don't know what my parents did? I've heard a lot of stuff, and I'd be surprised if it was nothing that I haven't heard before. That doesn't mean that you can hold yourself back and be surprised by the results of holding yourself back. You have to be willing to deal with these things if you want to move through. Be willing to work through these issues. Identify them. Identify the issue, what it is. Okay, I remember this happening. I wish I could share from my own perspective about this. Something that had happened to me when I was a kid, and something else that happened, and I realized that it really affected me. I didn't realize that it had, but it really did. And so I've identified them. The next thing, forgive. Whoever was involved, just forgive. Let it go. And the next thing, learn from it. What can you learn from it? How can you let it be something not that holds you back, but something that propels you forward? Maybe, for instance, instead of, I'm angry that this happened to me, I'm going to help those people who it happened to as well. See what I mean? Now, obviously, if you're in it just to validate yourself, you're not going to be able to help other people because you're going to be doing it out of a place of being hurt. You have to forgive in order to really help someone else. Learn how to let things go. You have to find a place, and this is going to be hard to do. It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of learning. You're going to have to learn and relearn. Counselors can oftentimes help with this. And then accept these things that happen as a part of your history. It's something that happened. It may not be good, but it's a part of who you are, and that's okay. You don't have to have a perfect past, and you don't always have to know what to do in these difficult situations. Another thing that might help, depending on the situation, this I offer with a little bit of a word of caution here. Possibly put yourself in the person's shoes. There was something that happened to me, and I was really upset about it, but looking on it now as an adult, and if I was going through those things, I can understand how that could have happened. Now, I'm not saying to justify someone for doing something like rape or, beating you or something. I'm not saying that. Goodness, no, I'm not saying that. But when we start thinking, I'll never be like that, we start becoming the very person that we hate. And you might say, oh no, I'll never be like that. You're looking at the actions, what they did. But in becoming bitter towards them, your heart is going to follow suit with the same attitudes. Maybe your dad wasn't there for you because he was too driven. So now, in an effort to be there for your kids, you're gonna, I'm gonna make sure I have a good job, that I work, and not be there for them. See what I mean? The whole emotional detachment that you are irritated about, you're passing on to your kids. See what I mean? It's one of those things that don't be quick to say, I'm not going to do that. Just think about what I said. Sometimes porn addictions, and this is the I gave you the basic idea. Now I want to look at the more specific applications. Sometimes a porn addiction is used to cope with the realization of your own mortality. We realize that life is scary and hard, and porn offers us escape from that, and something that seems perfect. It's It's a controlled, perfect world of pleasure. The people never age. Everybody's just having fun all the time. And we use it as a way of hiding from our fears. And that's not great. First off, it won't help. It'll actually make the problem worse. And then you have to learn to deal with your fears. You have to learn to face it. So if you're afraid of death, what can you do about that? Well, besides having someone to talk to, having someone that you can do life with, besides those things, there's actually a lot of things you can do. Number one, enjoy today. Look outside, slow down, just enjoy the day. Stop. Don't think your happiness is around the next corner. It's not. Stop trying to earn value by your to-do list. Oh, if I just do this, then I'll be good enough, and then just let it go. Your value is not based on how much stuff you can tick off of a list before you die. Focus on the time you have rather than the time coming to an end. You're only going to die once, but I mean, you're living every day. You ought to focus on that. Enjoy that. When you start feeling your kind of heart racing and your mind getting away from you, focus it on something better. Worrying about dying isn't going to stop you from dying. It's going to stop you from living. Find an outlet. I use biking. You can probably tell. Find an outlet that works for you. Something that can, get rid of energy. Eat healthy, exercise. Not so that you'll live forever, but just as a way of expressing and letting it go. Listen to music. Learn to enjoy where you are and be content with where you are, rather than think that happiness is in the next job or in the next place or in the next thing that you get. Live for the next life through this one. And this is the one I really want to end on. A lot of times we give no regard to the fact that we are spiritual beings. Religion is inherently part of who we are as people. It always has been, it always will be, regardless of what you read in a science fiction book. So instead of running from that, realize it and get your heart right with God. Live for God through this life. Still live in this world, still do things that matter, but do things looking forward, not looking back in fear. And I hope that helps. Bye!